Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure, is sponsored by SJ&L General Contractors. They are licensed in both Alabama and Tennessee, and they provide services such as mass grading, storm drainage, sewer and concrete improvement, asphalt paving, erosion control, demolition, and heavy hauling. If you need any of these services, contact them 931-433-4660, 931-433-4660. Also, they are in need of heavy equipment operators, concrete finishers, CDL dump truck drivers, and pipe layers. If you're interested in employment with this family-owned business, you can go to the website www.sjnl.com. That's www.sjnl.com. Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. I am your host, Lonnie Jones. My wife and I have had a wonderful life. It has been full of very pleasant experiences, and some of them just outright adventures. We moved to Huntsville in 1984 for me to work with the church as a full-time minister. I have been a minister in some capacity since 1980. I'm also a licensed professional counselor. I've been in private practice since 1998. While living in Huntsville, I was invited to serve as a police chaplain and was assigned to a SWAT team in 1992. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm an adventure educator, and I'm an avid outdoorsman. I like to hunt, I dabble in rock climbing, and I play around some with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And although those things sound pretty exotic and it sounds like that our life is just overrun with adventures, I've come to find out that there's a lot of adventure in just the mundane. Daily living is an adventure. And every day that the sun shines is a hope of some kind of adventure. I used to write about these little stories in a church bulletin article, and we decided that instead of asking you to read those things, that we would just give you an opportunity to listen to some of these stories. We'll take those stories, the adventuresome and the mundane, and we'll look at the facts. From the facts, we'll draw concepts, and from the concepts, we'll make applications. Now, one little caveat about the facts is most of the time we'll try to relay the facts just as they happened. Every now and then, we found it entertaining to relate the facts the way other people remember that they happened. And there'll be a little bit of embellishment. It's all in good, clean fun and for educational purposes. I hope you enjoy listening to these stories, and I thank you for keeping up with Jones. I spent the summer of 1983 in Montgomery, Alabama. I shared an apartment with my brother. Every weekend, we would go somewhere to preach. Now, the places that we were invited to preach were only because someone knew one of us. And the invitation was usually, you guys come in on Friday night, and we'll adventure on Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday you guys split the services, and one of you preach Sunday morning, and one of you preach Bible class, or one of you preach Sunday night, and then y'all go back home. And because they knew us, it was always, and hey, you guys bring your rifles, and Lonnie, you bring your ropes. I wonder what the people at Shadowwood Apartments in Montgomery thought. Because every Friday night, the Jones boys would walk out of that apartment with long rifle cases, a duffel bag full of ropes, and preaching suits. Maybe they thought we were assassins or bounty hunters or worked for the CIA or something. Who I did work for that summer was the Alabama Department of Public Safety. I was in headquarters at Dexter Avenue. I'd gotten a job through a program called the CETA program. I was an 18-year-old who was not living at home. And I worked very closely at the front desk, checking badges and running errands for the colonel and washing his car, and sometimes would get to fly in the helicopter. And it was a pretty much a glorified gopher's job, but on that front desk with me was a young man named Simi Jeffries. Simi Jeffries was waiting to turn 21. He'd already completed the academy in Selma. And in those days, on his 21st birthday, he would get his hat, his magnum, and his county. Also there that summer was Lieutenant Roy Smith, the public information officer, and old Major McGriff. They told me that McGriff was the original motorcycle cop in Alabama, and he spent a lot of his career escorting Shug Jordan as he coached the Auburn Tigers. Major McGriff was a rabid Auburn fan and a very true Southern gentleman. At the end of that summer, he asked me what my plans were, and I told him I was going to go back to college and finish my Bible degree. And he said, "Well, Lonnie, my boy, when you get back up there to divinity school, you tell them you didn't convert none of us, but we didn't convert you." And then he laughed, that old deep barrel laugh of his, and then he said, "But in all seriousness, if that divinity school doesn't work out, you have a guaranteed spot at Selma, and we have you a hat and a magnum." I explained to him the story of the lady from 830 Battery Lane and said I had a debt of honor, and that as much as it was tempting to become an Alabama state trooper, I probably better go back to divinity school. Simi Jeffries, the young man that I worked with that summer, got his hat, and he got his magnum, and he got his county. And if you'll drive west on Highway 72 going into Athens, Alabama, you'll cross a bridge named after that young man. I think he served as a state trooper less than a year, and he gave his life wearing that hat and carrying that magnum and patrolling that county. Many years later, I flirted with the idea of working for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I went deep into the selection process, and I don't know if it was my test score or something that they were just waiting on, but they told me to reapply or to re-enter the process the next year. My prayers had been fairly specific that if I didn't get accepted that summer, I wouldn't do it. And so I closed the door and turned my back on the law enforcement career. And wouldn't you know it, all those years later, I'm working with the police. I'm not a policeman. I'm not an officer. I'm not a shooter. I'm not an operator. I'm trained as a negotiator. I have trained with and learned from the guys on the SWAT team for the last 29 years. I'm not at their level. I'm not on their par, but I'm a step above a civilian gun handler, I think, just because I know some things that everybody else doesn't know unless you're in law enforcement. And because of that involvement, I get to teach some things. And I was in a class. I was one of the presenters, but this particular model of class that we use brings other people in to teach us. That's the way the model works. It's a team teaching, and we want the officers in the class to get to meet the community resources. And so we're sitting in this lecture room, and one of the guest instructors, I think she has an expertise in addictions and trauma. She asked, before I began my presentation, I want to know why you guys do what you do. And they went around the room. And the answers are similar to the answers you get on the first day of police academy. I want to serve. I want to protect. I want to help people. Now, the words you get from veteran officers have the same intent as the young cadets, but there's a maturity in it. And sometimes there's a sadness in it. Well, her not knowing that my being in the room wasn't because I was a police officer, but because I was a chaplain. Her eyes settled on me and asked why I did what I did. And I said, well, when I was a little boy, my brother and I thought we would be heroes. You wanted to grow up to be the Lone Ranger or Johnny Quest or the Phantom or Captain America. I wanted to sit in that room and her say, why do you do what you do? And my answer be that Bruce Willis answer, because I'm that guy. Well, I'm not that guy. And I realized very early on as a young minister that being a hero, fighting evil, was probably a pipe dream. I realized that probably the only way that evil is going to be vanquished from the planet is when the planet ends and the King returns and redeems us. So why do you do what you do? Why are you a minister, a counselor, a chaplain? I try to be a servant. Years ago, and it was back in the time when I still thought that I might be some kind of hero. But years ago, my brother called me, and I was living in Salem, Arkansas. And he had spent the better part of a night discussing a very life-altering decision with a young lady, trying to talk her into a different choice than she was about to make. And she did not make the choice that she didn't follow the wisdom and counsel of my brother. And in response to that pain and that frustration, he wrote a poem. And it sums up why I do what I do. And I don't want to be dramatic or self-aggrandizing. But this is why I'm not a hero. The poem is written in the eloquent language of a young man who has a law degree. It's much more eloquent than I speak. But I've had it in a book that I wrote years ago. I had it in a poster hanging in my office. I'll probably redo the poster and put it up again, since that lady asked us why we do what we do. Longings of a Warrior by Gerald Jones. How I wish that evil were not abstract and intangible and untouchable. How I wish I could line it up in my gun sight or drive home in it the blade of my knife, or simply just somehow get my hands on it. Right willingly I would meet it in combat. Right gladly I would cross swords with it, daring even death, and worse, if I could but have the hope of vanquishing it. And failing that hope of all hopes, still would I challenge it in hope of but striking a blow against it, in hurting it as it has hurt, in scarring it as it has scarred, in wounding it as it has wounded, so that for all its days in pain it would remember me as in pain others have remembered it. My courage would come from rage and my strength from ravishings observed, my determination from anguishings remembered. I wish, but it cannot be. Evil itself I cannot touch, though the wounds burned where it has scored. Evil itself I cannot hear, though the cries of its victims ring in my ears. Evil itself I cannot see, though the signs of its passing are blazoned all about me. Evil itself I cannot smell, though the stench of its decay sickens me. Evil itself I cannot taste, though I savor its gall in the saltiness of my tears. I wish. And perhaps such wishing should not come from one such as I. That wishing is born of a sense of helplessness in the face of agony and a sense of futility in a time of dire need. Perhaps it's because I wish I could prevent the tears instead of merely drying them. Perhaps it's because I'm weary of seeming to stay always one step behind the hurt. And though, in truth, my wish is vain, I can salve bleeding wounds. I can comfort the mourning. I can kneel beside the fallen. I can strengthen the fatigued. I can put my arm around sagging shoulders. I can help pick up the pieces. This I can do. This I shall do. There are 32 miles of cave passages in Cumberland Cavern. 333 feet underground is the Volcano Room. The Volcano Room is the site for the youth rally known as Erupt. It's an underground youth rally. It's an annual event. It takes place in October. The next Erupt is scheduled for October of 2021. Erupt is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. If you'd like more information, you may contact them at eruptyouithrally@gmail.com. That's eruptyouithrally@gmail.com. Or check out their website for more information, 3 W's and a dot, eruptyouithrally.com, www.eruptyouithrally.com.